متذلل خاش، أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته، وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعدم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عدم سلطانك، وعلى مكانك، وخفي مكرك، وظهر أمرك، وغلب قهرك، وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا، ولا لقبائه ساترا، ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت، سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي، ظلمت نفسي، ظلمت نفسي، وتجرأت بجهلي، وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي، كم من قبيح سترت، وكم من فاضح من البلاء أقلت، وكم من عثار وقيت، وكم من مكروه دفعت، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عدم بلائي، وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي، فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي، ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي، وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك؟ Oh Allah, my Lord, who do I have other than you, who can take from me all my troubles, all my trials, all my pains? من لي غيرك؟ أسأله كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، O my protector, Allah, O my protector, Allah, you put into effect through me a decree in which I followed my own desires. You told me one thing and I did another, O Allah. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس في من تزييني عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى، واسعده على ذلك القضاء. فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعد أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي في قضاءك. والزمني حكمك وبلاؤك، وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا. Oh Allah, I stand in front of you, broken and apologizing, weeping for my sins, O Allah. لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني. Oh Allah, there is nowhere that I can find where I can hide from what I have done. ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. Oh Allah, the only place I can escape from what I have done is by entering into your mercy. Allahumma faqbal udhri. Oh Allah, accept me despite all of my sins. وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عدمي. يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وصالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيت ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعدمتك ساجدا وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة وعلى ضمائر هوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارها سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها. Oh Allah, you know better than anyone my weakness, my shortcomings, oh Allah. In front of the trials of this world, nobody knows me better than you. Nobody knows what I go through the way you know what I go through. وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهله، ألا أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه يسير بقاء قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكارم فيه. Oh Allah, this world is so short, this life so temporary, its trials so fleeting, but Ya Allah, I cannot bear the pains of this world. So how will I in the next world, Ya Allah, bear the fire and the punishment that you send towards me? وهو بلاء تطول مدته, the length of that trial and the tribulation of the next life. ويدوم مقامه, whose station endures, where I will not be able to escape. ولا يخفف عن أهله, and whose sufferers are given no respite, no mercy. Ya Allah, how will I survive in that world, in that life? لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك, وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي, يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي, لأي الأمور إليك أشكو, ولما منها عدج وأبكي, لأليم العذاب والشدة أم لطول البلاء ومدتي, فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك, وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك, وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك, فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي, صبرت على عذابك, فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني, صبرت على حر نارك, فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا, لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين, ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين, ولا أبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين, ولا أنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين, يا غاية آمال العارفين, يا غياث المستغيثين, يا غياث المستغيثين, يا غياث المستغيثين, يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين, ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته, وضاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته, وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته, وهو يضج إليك ضجيج معمل لرحمتك, ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك, ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي, فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربا؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك, ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما. لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخالد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها، وبالقضية التي هتمتها وهكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت، وكل ذنب أذنبت، وكل قبيح أسررتها، وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم، والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيته، وبفضلك سترته، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزل، أو إحسان تفضل، أو بر تنشر، أو رزق تبسط، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطأ تستر. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيد ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا، وبخدمتك موصولا، وأعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي، يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. قو على خدمتك جواره، واشدد على العزيمة جوانه، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك، والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فارد ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعتف علي بمجدك وأحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك مطيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا رب نصبت وجهي وإليك يا رب مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا صلى الله على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Cool. I think we'll just speed on straight ahead. So, I know the kind of discussions that you guys have had before. And I know the kind of lectures that you've been having with Sadiq. And they're all based on Aqidah. They're all based on what we believe, where our beliefs come from, why we believe in what we believe in. What I want to do today is look at how that belief affects our actual life. So let's put it into practice. So our beliefs, and there's no right and wrong answer here in what we're going to discuss today. But our beliefs, they're all founded on something or other. They all come from some kind of basis. And that's what Sadiq's been going through in his sessions. I want to now see how we make decisions based off of that. I want to now look at how do we live our lives in relation to that. So the question we're asking today, it's not a very simple one, but it's one that we'll figure out together. In a world where it is so difficult to be Muslim, or rather in a country where it's so difficult to be Muslim, what is our responsibility? Do we stay? Do we go? If we go, where do we go? Why are we leaving? If we stay, same questions. And it's a difficult one to figure out because at the moment we're all here, we're all living here, we're all taking part in daily society in any which way we can. But I want to put in front of you guys a scenario. And I want to see what you guys think. What would you do if you were in this person's shoes? So let's say we have a young guy, roughly about same age as most of us. Let's call him around 18. Or in fact, let's say he's coming to the end of university now, 21. He's deciding what to do with the next steps of his life. This guy, I don't know, what should we call him? Himani, give me a name. What should we call this guy? Ahmed. Okay, so Ahmed, he's coming to the end of university. He's going to graduate in the summer, inshallah. Fingers crossed for Ahmed there. We'll do a little dua for him. But he wants to decide what happens with his life going forward after university. Now, Ahmed is relatively religious. Thank you. Recite Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, Ahmed's relatively religious, yeah? He tries to prays most of his prayers on time, where he can. He tries to go to the mosque here and there, tries to be involved with the mosque and the community at the mosque. He wants to be religious. He has that drive, he has that passion, he has that willingness. Whether he's always as religious as possible remains to be seen. Sometimes he slacks off a little bit, he falters, he misses a namaz or he's late for one. Sometimes, he doesn't give as much importance to special occasions Islamically or, to activities in the mosque or activities within the wider Muslim community outside of the mosque as well. Sometimes he's slacking a little bit in those things, but he's a Muslim, he identifies as a Muslim. If anybody asks him, the first thing he says is, I'm a Muslim. He's proud to be a Muslim, much like most of us would imagine ourselves to be as well. Now, Ahmed looks at the world around him and he sees a world where every time he steps out of his house, he's encouraged towards haram. Billboards, ads, all over, they'll show half-nude women. When he goes out, his friends encourage him to listen to music. He's, from the age of 13, his friends have been in physical relationships that they Islamically shouldn't have. And he's conflicted about all these things. He thinks this is all so normal where I live. And bearing in mind, he's grown up, let's say, in London as well, like us. So Ahmed, finishing university, relatively religious, but he's seeing this world around him in London that just doesn't align with those values. It doesn't align with that. So now Ahmed decides he wants to make a decision. Does he stay in London, or does he move to a country where it's easier to become a Muslim? Here, he knows that if he stays here, he's tempted by music, he's tempted by girls and relationships, he's tempted by curriculums that are put out in schools that not only encourage values that aren't Islamic, but also push it, they put emphasis on it. He knows everything around him is pushing him away from Islam. He wants to be a good Muslim. So, does Ahmed stay or does he go? And I just want to see, by way of show of hands, who thinks Ahmed should stay? If you think Ahmed should stay, raise your hand. And if you think Ahmed should leave the country, raise your hand. I'm still seeing a lot of hands that didn't go up at all. You guys think he should stay? And you guys, so two of you guys said you think he should leave, and two of you guys didn't put your hands up, which is dangerous because I'm going to come and ask you guys what you're thinking in a moment. But I'll give you a moment to put yourself on one side here now. Put yourself in Ahmed's shoes for a moment, just off of first instinct. All those who think he should stay, hands up. Hands up for stay. Himani, did you think stay or leave? Leave? You think you should stay? Good. Anybody else who thinks stay? No. And you guys, Himani, you think leave? Everybody who thinks leave, hands up. So, okay, all the boys think he should leave. You think he should leave as well? Okay, cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask. So you said you think he should leave. Why do you think he should leave? Okay, so you think he wants to connect with Allah in a way that it's very difficult in this society, so he should leave for that reason, yeah? Okay, Himani, you were one of the first to say leave straight at the start, so why do you think he should leave? Okay, so you think he should leave because you think it's better to avoid putting yourself in that circumstance at all. Then, to be fair, Islamically, we have this kind of principle that, masalan, if you are invited after work to go drinking with people from work, you're not going to have a drink, but you're going to a place where it gives you that temptation, and for that reason, you shouldn't. So that applies with your point. that leave just to get rid of that temptation entirely, just to move that away from yourself completely. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. If Ahmad leaves the country, what does that do for the people, for the Muslims who stayed in this country? Does that do anything for them at all? Does that help them in any way? No. And like I said, I don't want to encourage or discourage anyone towards any answer here. I don't want to encourage anyone towards thinking they should stay or leave. That's not a question I'm here to answer. I just want to look at what kind of things we value and just bring them to the forefront of our mind. The people who are left behind, there's no value for them. There's nothing for them. Ahmad's left. He's saved himself. He's made himself safe. But the people left behind, they're not going to be able to avoid this society. Now, I'll give you guys an example of a man who went to Ayatollah Bashir Najafi. He goes to Ayatollah in Iraq and he says to him, look, I work for this company. He asks pretty much the same question, but on a smaller scale. He says, I work for a company where Muslims aren't given a chance. They're shunned away. They're not given a chance to pray. If you don't go out drinking after work on a Friday, you're not valued. You'll be passed over for promotions and whatnot. So is it wajib on me to leave that company? So Ayatollah Bashir Najafi, who thinks he said yes, leave? And who thinks he said stay? He said stay in that company. Why? He said your job now is in that company. You have to rise through those ranks till you get to a point where you can change completely the culture of that company, the way that company works. So hearing this, has anybody changed their mind on whether you think Ahmad should stay or leave? There's anybody, and I'm going to ask the question again. Now, who thinks he should stay? Hands high up if you think stay. You think stay? You guys think stay, and who thinks leave? Cool. So pretty much everyone has switched over to leave now. Now I'm going to throw another spanner in the works. It's Medina. The Prophet has just announced Islam. The Prophet's just announced Islam, and now he's being persecuted. He's not being allowed to practice Islam. So what does the Prophet do? He leaves Mecca and he goes to Medina. The Prophet traveled. Imam Hussaini alayhi salam, when he was told you cannot live the life that you want to live in Medina, he leaves Medina, heads towards Iraq. Imam Ali Raza alayhi salam, when he's told you cannot live the life that you want to live, he leaves, he goes to Tus, he goes to Iran. Now, for those of you guys who just said that, no, in fact, he should stay, does that influence your decision at all? Now, do you think Ahmad should stay or should he leave? So hands up for stay again. You guys still think stay? You still think stay? And hands up for leave. Are you guys still leave? Cool. Okay, Hussein, you said you think he should stay. Why so?
You're given these challenges by God, and you have a thing called nafs, and it's your choice to tame your nafs, your desires and whatnot. So
Okay.
it's best to face these challenges and overcome them rather than to just escape them completely.
So you think it's important to actually face those challenges and overcome them, because that is what the challenge really is, isn't it? To try and be a good Muslim when everything goes against you, when everything tells you, no, do this and do that, and Islam's wrong in this way, and that doesn't quite make sense, and that's unethical, but Islam says to do it. You think you should, real Iman is to stand in front of those things and go, no, I'm a Muslim, so I'm going to practice Islam accordingly. Cool. That's a good response. And that's a good way to look at it as well. But then, why would the Prophet not do that? And our Imams, they've shown that they left their homelands, and we've seen that it wasn't just out of pure willingness that I want to leave. Imam Hussain alayhi salam, when he leaves Medina towards Iraq, it said he cries and he weeps so much he falls unconscious. The same is said for Imam Ali Raza alayhi salam. When he leaves towards Iran, they're saying he left weeping. He did not stop crying when he left. So what makes Ahmad's situation different to theirs? Why are they having to leave, and why is Ahmad staying to fight it and overcome it? And considering that, I want to go again and do another show of hands. Everyone who thinks Ahmad should stay in the country where it's difficult to be a Muslim, even though he wants to be, and everybody who thinks he should leave. You still think stay? Why so?
The main thing is to control all your nafs, to face as the
Yeah. Yeah. So you think you should have to overcome it. You should have to actually face up to those difficulties and those difficult times and find your way past them and through them. And that's what true Iman and Aqidah is. Now, with these principles, I now want to bring another element to it. Ahmed here is thinking about himself, and we're all thinking about Ahmed. Ahmed's finishing university. Within the next 10 years, he hopes to have a family. He knows he can control his nafs. Let's say Ahmed knows he can control his nafs, he can get through it. In the next 10 years, inshallah, he's hoping to get married and have a child. Now, that child growing up in this society, first of all, what do you guys think? So, a lot of you guys have grown up here, and I know you guys, so I can ask you guys, what do you guys think are some of the biggest challenges you face as a Muslim growing up here in London? Go on, Kayhan. Okay, trying to fit in with everyone even though it doesn't go against religion. And what impact might that have? Not necessarily on you, but what impact might that have on a young guy going through the schooling system and going through education here? Yeah, so there's two kind of options here. Either he becomes that outcast who everyone kind of shuns away to one side because, you know, this Islam thing that he believes in so much and he practices everything he does according to that. It just doesn't seem right according to everybody else because they don't follow that Muslim code of life. He could get outcast and alienated. That's one option. The other option is he just gives in and he starts to go along with what everybody else does, whether or not their values follow the same values that Islam teaches, whether or not it is what he wants to do, he gives in because there's that pressure and it's normal, it happens. Hussain, you had a thought as well.
I was just going to say, building on Kayhan's point, if you're in a society where it's so like prevalent, ideologies that aren't of your own religion,
Yeah.
it's very easy to be influenced by them.
Because you're surrounded by other ideologies, it is so much more easy to be surrounded by them. It's true. So now, Ahmed managed to get through all of these difficult times and he managed to, fight his way through all of those outside influences. But in 10 years, he wants to have a family. What's his responsibility to his kids in terms of making sure that they have an Islamic upbringing and a religious upbringing? Does that responsibility, again, the first question, extend to him leaving the country to get those difficulties away from them? And you guys are parents here, so you'll have a lot more insight than some of the guys here. As a parent, did you ever consider, maybe I should move away, or maybe I should try and keep them away from these difficult times, maybe homeschooling or something like that, if not something as drastic as moving away? You think leaving this country is not the solution? What would you say is? Absolutely. Yeah. So, and mashallah, may Allah reward you for that and may Allah make you successful as well, inshallah. As parents, it's a very big consideration for your children. Now, for you, you find that leaving the country wasn't the right solution. It's not the best solution. What about you guys? I know none of you guys are parents, far from it at the moment. But considering what you want for your family in the future, like we all do, and considering the difficulties of this world, so we're at a stage right now, and I'll lay out the facts here. From the age of 8 years old, a girl can be questioned in school over why she wears hijab without a guardian or an adult present. She'll be questioned alone as to why she wears the hijab and expected to give a satisfactory answer. In schools, we're seeing more and more curriculums pushed out where un-Islamic values are, like I said, not only being pushed out, but they're being emphasized upon. We're seeing more and more anti-Muslim rhetoric in this country. We're seeing more and more difficulties when it comes to trying to be a Muslim in this country. So for you guys here, what do you think your responsibility is to your next generation, to the kids that you inshallah one day get to have? And again, the same question. By way of show of hands, who thinks your responsibility extends to leaving the country and that would be the solution that you think is a good one in this instance? And everybody who thinks, what did I just ask? I just asked staying in the country or leaving. So everybody who thinks leaving, show of hands. And everybody who thinks staying in the country is still what you need to do, show of hands. Okay. Now, we seem pretty clear-cut. In all scenarios, we're staying in this country. We're staying here, yeah? The first question I want to ask is, for how many of you who said you want to stay here, for how many of you is the reasoning behind that you don't think there's another place that is better than here, or you think everywhere else you go you'll find some kind of difficulty regardless? Does anybody have that reasoning for wanting to stay here? Is anybody's reasoning to stay here that what you have here in terms of benefits outweighs the struggles that you might face Islamically? And I'm assuming nobody's put their hands up yet. Is anybody here's thought that it is the responsibility of yourself to fight through your battles, and in the same way your kids to fight through those battles when they're born and grow up in this time? Kayhan, you seem on the fence. What's going through your mind?
What you're saying does make sense about, you should stay in this country and fight through the struggles and let your kids fight the struggles that you went through as well. Because at one point you'll be able to relate to your child as well, knowing what they go through.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you have the option available and you know it's in your best interest, and your niyyah is pure, saying that you want to do it for the sake of Allah, that you don't want to be tempted by any of these distractions or whatever, then if you have the opportunity there with you, you might as well just take it. That's what I think personally.
And that's the opportunity to leave?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So, and we're in this kind of scenario, it's hypothetical, so we're putting aside the practicalities of it. We're putting aside the finding a job and having enough money to relocate and all of that. But you think if you do have the opportunity and you think it's best in your situation, you think leaving would be a good option? Yeah? Himani, you went the other way. You're in agreement that you think leaving is the right option if you're able. If you're able to, okay. Go on, Kayhan.
I just want to say that leaving isn't like, it's not like a scapegoat option where like,
No.
you feel like as if you've got no other choice left to do it, you might run for the easy option or whatever. But like, it just depends on, like I said, your needs. Like, if you're doing this for the sake of Allah and you want to make your religion, like your deen stronger and everything, and you do it for that purpose, then 100% if you want to go to another country and you feel like it's probably better in it, you should just take the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not looking at leaving as running away. No. It's actually much more difficult to get up and leave than it is to stay put. And again, I'll emphasize this because it might seem like I am doing it. I'm not encouraging in any direction. Just want to try and figure out for ourselves how we think we should practice our Islam. So, a lot of you guys seem to go deep into thought when we pose the question of your kids, future generations. What's your name? What's that? Rayhan. Rayhan, going off looks alone, you look like you're very far off having kids of your own anytime soon. But who knows? If we think about the next generation, thinking about kids of our own, what then is our responsibility to them? We've said it's not so far as leaving, but what is our responsibility to them, do you reckon?
I believe that, like, myself, I need to educate myself.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I can, I try to learn Islam as best as I can, so when I do have kids, I can educate them and guide them to the right path.
So, in terms of their religion, you think your responsibility is to educate them and teach them?
Yeah, no, but I need to first educate myself.
Of course. Sister, in terms of educating and teaching your children, it goes quite a long way. When it comes to protecting them, how much do you think we should do, or how much do you think parents should do? What kind of steps should they take? Should they maybe homeschool them, or should they kind of monitor who they're friends with? How much do you think the parent should try and keep those kids away from those un-Islamic values, as opposed to just letting them be free?
No, you can't control them. Like they are going outside, like they have friends. They in school. You can't control them all the time.
Absolutely.
So I think, as I do,
Yeah.
till now I'm really trying hard to think about that. How to control them?
Yeah.
Like how to. I don't know. Still, I myself is confused.
It's still difficult for everyone.
It's really hard.
It is. And I think a useful point here is we've got young guys who grew up in this country. Alhamdulillah, you're here at a Thursday night program, which means your parents have done something right. For you guys, what kept your affinity with your religion? Hussain, I'm not going to ask you because we all know. The rest of you guys, what kept your affinity with your religion? What keeps you or kept you in those difficult times aligned with Islam? And I want to pose that one to the guys specifically. Go on, Kayhan.
Well, I think a major contribution to me staying within this masjid and Hussaini mission and like being as close to my religion was first, like, of course, my parents, my teacher as well, my Sunday school teacher that I learned from here, and also my close friends that I'm surrounded with as well. For example, Hussein, Asad, and other friends,
So,
Ali.
let's go into depth on that. Let's kind of detail in. You said your parents first, yeah? What was it your parents did specifically?
So my parents, ever since I was like 4, 5 years old, I come Monday to Friday here learning Quran from after school.
Did you always want to?
Sometimes, you know, when you're a kid, you know, you want to just go football club or whatever. So sometimes you're not always wanting to go, but you know, at the end of the day,
It's really hard to push them.
It's very difficult, isn't it?
Like Rehan, like Kehan,
Yeah.
we used to go bring them here for 5 days a week for Quran.
Monday to Friday, yeah.
It was really hard bringing them from school and drop them here and straight after learning from school, then learning here Quran.
Of course.
Really hard.
They want to play. It's normal. We all do. So, for you, just that kind of absolute, this is what we're doing, it worked.
you mean my parents, for myself.
As in, your parents saying that this is what we're going to do,
Yeah.
that worked for you.
Yeah, because but when I think only when you start to get older, you start to appreciate and realize like my mom she would bring me home from school, she pick me up, she drop me off school, pick me up, she give me food straight after we'd be here, she'd be here as well, and then she'd drop me straight here, pick me up 5 days a week, and then after when I stopped that, I started going to Sunday school, Sunday picking me up, dropping me off, and then you start to realize they're doing this for a reason, of course.
Yeah.
They're not just sending you for no reason, and it's a benefit for you as well. I think, you know, as a kid, like you don't really understand these type of like values that they
Of course.
uphold, because you know you're just still growing and you don't understand it, of course, and that's why, alhamdulillah, we should always be appreciative of our parents and everything, because
Absolutely.
we're doing this for our own benefit. So even if you don't realize it,
Yeah.
you don't see it at the beginning. When you get older, it hit you one day. You'll be like, this is for me. Because if my parents, my mom or my dad, didn't consistently bring me to the masjid every week, God knows where I would be now.
So for you, consistency is very key. Consistency of coming to the masjid. Hussein, I want to ask you a slightly different question, but trying to reach the same kind of understanding here. For you, do you think a strict approach would have worked better, or do you think an approach of explaining, you know, this is what we do, this is why we do, and now it's your choice whether you want to come or not? Do you think that would work?
I think, like Kayhan said, you're too young to understand sometimes. So even with an explanation, it's not as easy as, you know, explain it and you understand.
Yeah.
It takes time. And we can just repeat the question one more time. It's like,
So which approach do you think would have worked better for you personally?
I think a strict approach isn't the way, because I think you should be nurturing of your kids.
Mm-hmm.
If one day they decide like, oh, I don't want to come anymore, you have to try and explain it to them. If they may not understand, you have to push it, like push for it basically. Right?
Yeah. Go on, Kayhan's got another.
I was trying to say, I feel like what Hussein said is very true as well, because if you have that like upbringing of just being strict on you, forced on you, like this, that, just straight every single day, yeah. There's a lot of people that I know, right? They had the same upbringing, Islamically, everything. They grew up wearing hijab from the age of like 4 to like 13, whatever. But then as they get older, they start to realize that they're more imposed and feel more like burdened and more strict by these things. So they want to indulge in other stuff that they weren't always introduced to,
Yeah.
which leads to unfortunately like other bad haram activities or
You see it a lot, especially amongst university students. So the point is that if you keep restraining someone or you keep the strict approach constantly, then the moment they get that taste of freedom, all hell is unleashed, quite literally. Now, we've spoken a lot about growth here. As you get older, you realize this. As a child, you don't know this. What do you think are the most key ages for going from being dependent on your parent to independent and starting to think, actually, no, that doesn't make sense, or I want to do this? And I don't want to pinpoint a numerical age, but what kind of stage in your life? Are we talking primary school, end of primary school? Are we talking secondary school, GCSE age, sixth form? When is it that you really start to mature in your thinking? And remind me of your name? Ali. I'll remember that, don't worry. Ali, when do you think, for you, you started to mature in your thinking of, okay, I want to actually, either take some initiative or I want to question what it is that my parents are telling me?
I think when you get into secondary school, when you start to have to meet new people, and you have to, primary school, you have a very strict routine. You're sort of taken to your lessons. You're very like pampered in that way. When you're at secondary school, you get a lot of independence. You have to make your own way to your lessons. You have to do a lot of things. You have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of time managing yourself. So at that point, you can actually start having your own ideas about who you are, what you believe in, and also if you think that you need to have more freedom, less freedom in yourself, or how tempted you are by those haram things in the world.
Okay. And Himani, without giving us any kind of indication as to what your parents did, let's say you're finishing your GCSEs, you've been approached by Brentford, you're part of their academy set up already, they want you to sign a professional contract, you want to pursue it. You've got the opportunity to be a professional football player, your parents say, absolutely not, you're doing your A-levels, you're going to university, that's the end of that. That's what some parents would say, and a lot of parents do say, when their kids come forward with an idea that they want to do something different. You're in the parents' shoes now. Your kids just come to you and said, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I want to become a professional footballer. You in your heart know that A, the chances of him actually making it as a footballer are very, very slim. You know that it's probably not the best decision for him. You know that it's possibly detrimental to his future. What approach do you take now in nurturing him or protecting him? And how do you kind of handle that situation?
In this current generation, we're close to the arrival of the time of our Prophet Muhammad Islam. Like no offense to anyone that wants to be a footballer, but the Imam won't need a footballer in Islam. I think the Imam is going to need someone that can help him in any sort of way, whether it be technological, engineering, science based, but like anything that the Imam could use.
Yeah.
Like football, by all means, you can pursue it as like a hobby or a passion, but something that could help the Imam is the way someone could direct my child.
So, directing your child, what approach would you take in directing them? Would you tell them, absolutely not, you're going to university, you're studying aerospace, for instance, aerospace engineering, or do you go the other way and go, this is what you want to do, I'll let you try it, figure it out, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, if it works, cool, but I'm going to let you do what you want. Where do you find your balance and how do you approach for your kid?
I am siding with the second approach of like somewhat giving them like leniency.
Giving them the least to make their own mistakes.
Yeah, but if they impede I feel like a lot of people start maturing when they're around 18, so A level age.
You think, right, okay, so once they're around A-level age, you'd give them a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more freedom to make their own decisions, yeah? Right. Now I want to put us, and kind of circling it back round to the original question, yeah? We all seem to think that nurturing, protecting, and engaging our child in discussion is very important. When it comes to the concept of staying in this country or leaving, if we don't leave, if we stay, as a parent, what become your priorities in terms of protecting your child? So what, and I want to ask you in a very specific way, what is it that you first try and instill in your child? Do you first make sure they're reading their namaz on time, or first is your main absolute priority Quran, or is your first and main priority, for instance, their Islamic history? What do you think is the most important thing? And first I'm going to ask you, sister, as a parent, and then I'm going to come over to the guys and ask you as guys who've just recently gone through it. So what do you think is the most important thing that you have to teach your child in order to protect them in this world?
According to Islam, first they need to understand Islamic. Then what are the rules are?
Mm-hmm.
They have to understand first that. Then they have to pray. The first thing
Yeah.
as a Muslim and a Shia.
Yeah.
So
So you think first you have to focus on Aqidah and Usul, and then kind of the laws and the practices, and then we start to come towards namaz and our deen. Yeah? Would you guys agree with that, or would you take a different approach and maybe teach them something or encourage them towards something else first? All those of you guys who think Aqidah, then, so yeah, Usul, then rules, then Furu, that's the way to go about it. If you agree with that, show of hands on this side. And if you think you'd focus on something else, show of hands. Ali, first you, and then we'll come to Himani. What would you focus on first?
I'd focus on namaz first, get them, the wajibats, get them in first, because then they get that into a habit. And when people pray, when they hear the call to prayer, that will automatically, they'll come to the mosque more often, they'll come to Jummah. They'll be in and around the community, where those conversations maybe will start happening a bit naturally rather than forced.
Okay, so you think,
Less of a chore and more just a lifestyle.
right, so for you, the importance of nurturing them in relation to their salah is the most important thing. Himani, what were you going to go for?
I wouldn't think instilling all the rules to them at first is the best idea to go, because like you can imagine them as like a convert, because like you tell them you have to wake up, you have to pray on this, you have to pray like set time, 5 times, a few wudu, you have to fast, like all these rules would overwhelm them, and I think like taking it slow, so like really from namaz, Qurans, and then leading up to more important things.
Okay, so you think you would follow the same kind of structure as the sister, but without the rules being in there? So you would go Aqidah first and then namaz?
Just
Slowly filter them in. Yeah, cool. And this is one thing that I recently saw online, actually, from a convert. I can't remember what it was or where I saw it. There's an actual convert speaking about the amount the Quran speaks about rules and the amount we teach it. If you actually look in the Quran, there are very few rules in there. The Quran tells you very little about the rules of Islam. Yet, when we're growing up or when a new convert comes to Islam, they're constantly told the rules. They're constantly told you can do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, that's haram, don't do this, stay away from that. And I see your point there as well. But again, I see where the sister's coming from in that you do have to get those in there as well. The child needs to know these are your values. Now, that is explicitly Islamic. Your Aqidah, the rules, the Furu'adeen, that's explicitly Islamic. But see, we're living in a very tough time where the anti-Islamic rhetoric that is surrounding us, it's not explicit. It's not in our face. They're not shouting at you that, you know, you're a dirty Muslim or something like that. No, they're not doing that. They're indoctrinating beliefs and values that seem to make complete sense in everyone's heads, but the only reason we reject them is because they don't align with Islamic values, and that's where we take our religion from. That's where we take our way of life from, our code of life. So, and unfortunately, I can't give very explicit examples either, but given the nature of the anti-Islamic rhetoric, where does our focus then, in terms of protection for these children, lie? A lot of Muslim parents now are thinking about homeschooling children. A lot of people are. Just by way of show of hands, who thinks homeschooling would be a good idea? And who thinks public schooling, but educating them a different way, would be a better idea? Show of hands, yeah? Okay, so Rehan, tell me, why do you think that public schooling is still better?
I believe if you homeschool a child, you start being like an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about the social aspect of it, if we leave Islam out of it, the social aspect of it, they'll be like very quiet. They won't like how do I say this? They won't be able to like speak up.
Yeah.
If I give you an example, right? If they don't have confidence, yeah. So let's say like Christian, ask them about Islam, and we almost like challenge them about Islam, and they don't have confidence to be able to speak back. Almost like
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking at this purely from a social perspective, without being surrounded by people of different perspectives, it becomes very difficult to then speak on their level. Like for me, I'll give you an example of myself. I went to a school where my secondary was almost entirely Asian kids and black guys. And then my sixth form, I think there were about 3 black guys in the whole school and only a handful of Asians. It was an entirely white sixth form, which is a complete culture shock, but it gave me the ability to communicate with everybody on every level, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, what their background is, what their social status is, what their class is. And it gives you a massive step up. So for you here, would you say that the social aspect is more important than the difficulties they face? What do you reckon? Go on, Ali.
You're able to follow your religion into your nuts and keep your focus in spite of all of that different perspectives, influences, peer pressure. It only makes your belief stronger.
That's very true. So if you are in that public school life and you're surrounded by people who are giving you un-Islamic influences and un-Islamic values, and you're still able to remain a Muslim and retain your religion, then there's very little that can shake you going forward. There's very little that can shake you as you grow up because you've been able to retain that there. Just out of interest, how many of you guys went to a school where the majority of people weren't Islamic, weren't Muslim? And how many of you went to a school where the majority of people there did not relate to your way of life? Because that's a different question now. Because if they're strict Catholic, they might still relate to a lot of the things that you relate to. If they're Jewish, they might relate to a lot of things you relate to, but they don't share the same religion. So quite a few more of you put your hands up for people who don't relate to the same thing that you do. For you, do you think it made it more difficult or it strengthened you that you went to a school with people of different perspectives and different values who maybe didn't relate to you as much? Hussain, your hand went straight up when I asked first.
It definitely strengthens you because as in, if you never challenge your own belief set with other people's beliefs, you will never have true validation of your own beliefs, if that makes sense. As in, what makes other people's belief sets incorrect or not as valid as your own? You need to be able to understand theirs to understand your own.
Absolutely, and it's one thing that I stress all the time. And often, being someone who sits on the minbar, I have to be careful when I say this. Hear me out completely before I say this. If you don't ever consider the fact that Islam might be wrong, you can never ever get to the point of what we call haqqul yaqeen, the true certainty. Because if you've never questioned it, you've never considered that it might be wrong, then the tiniest thing can shake your faith. Having questions about your Islam Not only is it natural, it's encouraged. You have to. Do you think if you were to leave this country and go to an Islamic country, you would lose that entirely? I see Hussain nodding. The rest of you guys, do you think yes or no? Would you lose that ability to challenge your religion if you were living in an Islamic country? Himani, you shook your head. Do you think you can challenge your religion or not?
You can, but to a certain degree. So, like, say if I move to Saudi Arabia,
Mhm.
sure it's a Muslim country, but it's more Sunni
Okay, yeah.
over Shia. So, like, we have different perspectives.
Yeah. Now, we've looked at all these different kind of angles and perspectives, and the last one I want to put in front of you, what time do we normally finish? Okay, cool. The last one I want to put in front of you here. As we grow up, there's certain things that everybody, no matter who you are, no matter how much you've got, there's certain things that you will always feel you wished you had as you grew up. And there's a natural urge and instinct to want to give that to your children. To want better for them than you had for yourself. That's normal and that's natural. How much do you think you balance? I want them to have the best opportunities in this life with I want them to have the best opportunities in the next. Bearing in mind, and I'm only saying this so that I don't influence anyone by the question, Islam tells you want the best of both. Now, you leave this country, you're giving them the best of the afterlife, masalan, for instance. You stay in this country, you're giving them the best of this life. You're in London, the world's your oyster, you've got all these opportunities, all these chances. Which one of those two influences your decision more? So for those of you who would be more influenced by the fact that you have greater opportunities for this life in London, and therefore you stay, show of hands. I'm glad Ali's brave enough. Ali, Asad. And for those of you who think, no, what's more important is making sure that they have the next life set, and so you leave. Okay. I've worded that in a way where people will automatically go for the second option. Ali, you were brave, you went for the first option. Why?
I think in order to get the best for your next life, you need to be able to sort of conquer and sort of overcome this life. And the better to do so for yourself or for your children in a difficult situation with those teachings and being able to get through this kind of life is possibly one of the hardest tests you can have of your faith. So in order to be able to overcome that will surely get in your entire when you get into the next life.
You think preparing your kids with everything they need to get through this life and then putting them in a place where they have the best opportunity for this life as well, it sets you up for both. Cool. Rehan, you thought the opposite.
The reason I thought the opposite because this life is temporary, and as mankind we're losing time. Surah al-Asr.
Yeah?
We're losing time by the minute. So I believe the next opportunity you get to take your children to like a country where they're more likely to become like more like they'll like, have like strong iman and have that
It's very true. The next life is the one that matters the most, but we have to find where the best opportunity for both lives lie. So let's balance the books a little bit. We know all the difficulties of living here and being in this country and how that will affect your iman and your Islam. What do we think the drawbacks are of leaving this country and moving to another one? And I want to pose this question to everyone here. What do you think are the difficulties or the drawbacks of moving to another country? And that doesn't necessarily need to be a Muslim country. It can be a non-Muslim country where it's easier to practice your Islam. It could be a Muslim country. It could be a Shia country. You decide. But a lot of you still say vehemently that you would stay. What do you think are the drawbacks of leaving?
The
Financial aspect. It's very difficult to gather the finances on a practical level to move to another country. That's very true. That puts you in struggles. Go on, Kayhan.
Security of like your family.
Okay, so there's, yeah, moving to a lot of countries that we would consider to be Muslim countries, unfortunately, they don't have the peace and security that we have here. We are blessed with a fair bit of security here, aren't we? Anything else? Any other drawbacks of leaving this country for another one? Anything on this side?
Another country, I mean, if it comes to a problem in your mind, which country? Because nowadays, through social media, no country is safe.
That's true as well.
If you think, we know Pakistan and Afghanistan and all over the country, the social media is,
Yeah,
destroying everything.
it's true.
Nowhere is safe.
The world is open for everyone's opinions and everyone's ideas to be shared with everyone, which means that there's nowhere where you can hide from this stuff. And now I want to put a final thought in your mind and end it on this thought. Prophet Muhammad had to leave Medina. Imam Hassan alayhi salam stayed in Medina, but he had to go through a peace treaty with Muawiyah. He had to suffer persecution within Medina. Imam Hussain alayhi salam leaves Medina and goes to Iraq. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, he leaves Medina with Imam Hussain, goes to Sham, then he comes back to Medina and stays in Medina. Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha, she leaves Medina on the orders of the tyrant of the time. Not willingly, but on the orders of Yazid, she leaves Medina. Those were the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam struggles, difficult struggles. People were pelted with stones, they were attacked, they were killed, they were murdered, they were enslaved. Those are their struggles. And we think of that as a difficult, distant, far away set of struggles. We think they had it so much more difficult, we have it a lot easier now. And then you think of recent history, masalan. Shahid Baqir Nimr al-Nimr. You think of Sheikh Zakzaki, imprisoned, all his kids killed, and then eventually killed himself. You think of Hadrat bint al-Huda, the sister of Shahid Nimr, who was also killed. You think of when bullets were bombarded on the Haramain. You think those Shias living over there, they had it so difficult. They had to give up their lives, they had to give up everything. And you think of the time when Saddam would make people give up a limb to go for ziyarah of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. If you want to visit the Haram of Imam Hussain, there was a time not too far away, not that long ago, 70 years ago maybe. Our parents have seen these times, a lot of our parents, we're talking like maybe 60, 70 years ago, where if you want to go for ziyarah of Imam Hussain in Karbala, you have to literally give up a limb, cut off a hand or an arm or a leg or a foot, and then you can go for ziyarah. And people did, and we think they had it so much more difficult. Our lives are so much easier, we live in so much more comfort. And then you think, what happened in Peshawar the other day, what happens in Kabul in Afghanistan, day after day, week after week, month after month. You think of the Shias in Yemen, and you think of them in Lebanon and Iraq and Syria, and you think of all these people losing their lives, and you think they have it so much more difficult, they have it so much tougher than we do. But then it takes me back to a hadith which says that my Shias will not struggle more, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember the exact words of the hadith, but it says the Shias during Akhirul Zaman, the final times, will be the ones who struggle the most. Why? Because it's no longer physical. If you look at the civil rights movement in America, when African Americans wanted their rights, when it came to getting beaten up by police, they were on the front lines, they didn't care, they would take it. When it came to being shot by the KKK, they were on the front lines, they didn't care, they would take it. When it came to all of these physical aggressions, they would take it, they would have it. Why? Because they're ready for that. They can take that, they're ready. You know what the police did instead? They started giving them fines, arresting them, and just keeping them in prison. That's when people started to back down. Because all of a sudden, it's not physical. All of a sudden, it's mental, it's financial. All of a sudden, it's social. And all of a sudden, that's a lot more difficult now. How many of us see what happened in Peshawar and think, you know what, if it came to it, I would give my life for Islam. Inshallah, we will get the chance to one day. If we think, I would if I was in that situation. If I could, I would absolutely do it. I'd be ready for it. Oh, that's a thought that goes through my head. But does that mean that every single day when there's a temptation in front of me, I go, absolutely not, I'm not going to go towards that? Or do we sometimes fall prey to those temptations? At no point can we undermine our own struggles. We have to realize people have had it hard. We have it difficult as well. There's a reason that we're alive right now, today, and not in the time when the Prophet was leading marches to battle. There's a reason we're alive here in London as opposed to being alive somewhere in Peshawar, somewhere in Kabul, somewhere in Syria, somewhere in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in Iraq. There's a reason that this is our struggle. There's a reason that this is what we're faced with. And the best thing we can do, whether you choose to stay in this country, leave this country, homeschool, public school, whether you choose to completely shut your child away from all the dangers until you feel they're ready, or whether you choose to let them out into the open world and fight their way through, the most important thing is that we follow the guidance set by our prophets, imams, and then after them the scholars that are leading us in their ghaibah. And B, everything I do, I have to be prepared one day when I'm asked by Allah Azza wa Jal, can I justify what I did? Can I tell Allah Azza wa Jal, oh Allah, the reason I did this thing on that day, the reason I chose to stay in London instead of leave London, masalan, was because of this. And I'm able to say why I did it. The more we take an active approach in our lives, everything I do it knowing what I'm doing, with reason. It's very easy to just kind of lull your way through life. And it can become something very monotonous, very droning. Why? Because you're not taking an active role in your life. But as soon as you do, actively think about every decision, everything you do, not only then does it not matter whether you stay or go, whether you homeschool or public school your kids, whether, whatever decision you make, not only does it not matter, because you have your right justification, you're doing it according to principles set by the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and the scholars and the A'immah. Not only does it not matter, but whatever response you take, for Allah Azza wa Jal, that's acceptable. For Allah Azza wa Jal, that was the right response. Why? Because you did it with the right knowledge in mind. You did it having actively thought about what you were doing, and you know exactly what the justification for you doing that is. Allah Azza wa Jal, He's Ar-Rahman. Allah Azza wa Jal, He's Ar-Rahim. He's the beneficent, the merciful. He gives you, and He understands you as well. He understands what is going on in your mind. He understands the trials and tribulations He gives you. And on nights like this, like Shab Jum'ah, we have to remember Allah throws these trials and tribulations, these challenges at us, whatever they may be. And we all have different ones that we face. He challenges us all with these, and we have to be able to, at the very, very least, come out of the other side with them thinking, I know why I did what I did. That's the first thing we need to worry about as Muslims. Do we know why we do what we do? We're going to finish it off with 5 salawats, and I'm going to tell you what each of those salawats is for. So the very first one, today on the auspicious occasion of the birth, the wilada of Hazrat Qasim ibn Hassan, recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Second, we're now just about 1 week into what is a very, very grand month, the holy month of Sha'ban. And we pray to Allah Azza wa Jal, oh Allah, for the sake of this salawat that we are about to recite, to raise our ranks in this month, and oh Allah, allow us to take joy from the celebrations of Sha'ban. Recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Oh Allah, for all those people who lost their lives in Peshawar, all those people around the world who have given their lives and have become shaheed, though we do not consider them to be dead, they are still shaheed. Oh Allah, raise their ranks amongst the shuhada for the sake of this loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. The 4th salawat, oh Allah, for the sake of this salawat, we pray to you, Ya Allah, allow us to be justified in every decision we make. Allow us to make our decisions with the principles of Islam in mind. Oh Allah, when you do take us, allow us to be comfortable in every action and every decision we have taken in this life. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Ajil farajahum. And the 5th, the last and the loudest salawat is for the reappearance of the Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi al-Muntadhar, Ajjal Allah Ta'ala Farajhu al-Sharif. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Jazakallah.
الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن صالح والبتر المطهور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وأتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامكة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بإنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من داعم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من جلدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياء رسوله أني بكم مؤمن وبي بكم موقن بشراء ديني وخواتمي. أملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة علي أكبر عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن حسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرضيت به. زيارة شهداء كربلاء. السلام عليك يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليك يا أشفياء الله وأوداء. السلام عليك يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليك يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصر. السلام عليك يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها كنتم معكم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيارة الحضرة عباس. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها العبد الصالح المطيع لله ولرسوله. السلام عليك قد جاهدت ونصحت وصبرت حتى أتاك اليقين. لعن الله لكم من الأولين والآخرين والحقيكم بدرجك الجحيم. السلام عليك يا غريب الغربة السلطان يا أبو الحسن علي بن موسى رضا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان ألمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجه وسع الله مخرجه وسهوره. السلام